VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And on Friday, it is a news roundup and comment edition. However, this week, in for Jim Schneider, I am Dalton Windsor. There was a Windsor in the White House this week. Why not one here in Studio E, I guess. So, in any event, God willing, Jim will be back with us on Monday next week. Our thanks to Sandy for compiling news stories all this past week. And, of course, a tip of the hat to Brother Dennis at Master Control, helping us to get the broadcast out not only this hour, but throughout the broadcast day all this week here on the VCY America Radio Network. And it's been a big week, isn't it always, when we come to you looking back at things and getting caught up on that which is newsworthy for the program. But I have to go back to late last weekend. If you don't know, we here in southeast Wisconsin, we were in a rally. We had a rally last Friday night in our headquarters city of Milwaukee, actually just outside of Milwaukee. And we were at the venue, and we'd had a great time with a great, speaker for us. Pastor Greg Lundstedt was recognizing VCY's 65 years of broadcast ministry, and we went through that, and enjoyed seeing the folks that came to the rally, had the broadcast on the network, and within probably a half hour of our finishing last Saturday night, that is when the news began going around the world that there had been yet another attempt on President Trump's life. And so, yes, I know that happened late Saturday night, but then, of course, the world awoke on Sunday morning to hearing about it if they missed it the night before. And so that's really, it was a rough start to the new week as you look back. And, of course, we're thankful that, there was no lives lost, that our president is alive and well today. But it has just brought on, so much more talk about how did that happen? How did they get through security? It is being reported from Newsmax, House Speaker Mike Johnson immediately on Monday this week calling for the Secret Service to, quote, tighten up its security protocols. Now, there's plenty of video out there. The security footage shows how this man just busted in like he was a football receiver heading for the end zone. If you haven't saw that footage, it is something else. Instead of carrying a football, however, I think he had, a shotgun, and just barreled through. And so there were many that were just, yes, they're standing there on guard, and he barreled through so fast. I mean, we are all human, and yes, these guys are... They are the Secret Service, and you would think they would be prepared for something like this, but it was a fresh attempt, I guess, at doing so. So they said, tighten up your security protocols, rightfully so, after that gunman so quickly breached the checkpoint at the White House Correspondents' Dinner occurring at the Washington Hilton, where in attendance was President Donald Trump and his wife Melania, Vice President Vance, other senior officials that were attending the annual gathering there. And then, of course, the gunfire erupting. It's amazing there was no one killed. Praise God. But you see that video, the culprit breaching a checkpoint, tried to move toward the main ballroom before he was stopped. First reports was that the shooter, the assailant, was dead, but that was, of course, retracted. I don't know where that came from, but no, he was just stopped in his tracks there. Many Republican leaders, including Mike Johnson, expressing relief that the president was not harmed and praised law enforcement's response. Johnson, who was also obviously attending the dinner, criticized what he described as an insufficient screening measures at the venue. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt defended the response by federal agents. And I do believe we have this audio for you.
And while we are blessed to have a fearless president, we should not live in a country where such constant fear of political violence permeates our society every single day. We can and we should have fierce disagreement in this country. As you all know, we disagree often, myself in this role and all of you in the news media. But those disagreements must remain peaceful. Debating, peaceful protesting, and voting are how we need to settle disagreements, not bullets. Nobody in recent years has faced more bullets and more violence than President Trump. This political violence stems from a systemic demonization of him and his supporters by commentators, yes, by elected members of the Democrat Party, and even some in the media. This hateful and constant and violent rhetoric directed at President Trump day after day after day for 11 years has helped to legitimize this violence and bring us to this dark moment.
The press secretary also did go on to quoting the president, saying that he was satisfied that the protocols did work, that the Secret Service did their jobs well. They communicated with one another to get the president, the vice president, the first lady, everyone to safety as quickly as they could, and obviously to stop the threat that happened there Saturday night. But, no, these things should not happen, as Caroline Leavitt is, but it has become what we are used to now. We're just used to it. The response, our response must just be in anger, and if you don't get along or you don't agree with someone, you don't deserve to live, according to some of these. But what do you expect? What do we expect from a society that kills innocent life in the womb? And if we're so willing to accept that just as normal and as just a simple decision or choice, why should we be surprised when we think nothing of killing our fellow man, let alone our president? God help us. God help us in this country. Now, I'm half a century old, little more. I can remember 1981. I was but 5 years old when President Reagan was shot. And praise God, he survived that. So, I mean, if you're my age or somewhere around, you've seen this before. But interesting, and even President Trump has commented in his response there at press conference immediately after that, why the violence toward him, well, anytime you do have leadership making these big decisions, making the hard decisions, you are always going to, and history shows that you're always going to have great opposition. And we know as Christians, we know that we are not battling flesh and blood, but principalities, right? Principalities and powers. So we do have serious issues in this country. We know that. God help us. And we all need to seek the Lord about it, that we think so little about life, that we think so much of our own opinions that we are willing to take someone else's life if they do not share the same values as us, or they don't see it as things the same. And then we see this headline today on the top of the stack, Fox News reporting some 600 groups of people. Now this is today, May 1, by the way, it's MayDay, Today, some 600 groups, including hardline communists and groups affiliated with the Democratic Party here in America, have mobilized coast to coast to demonstrate for MayDay, socialism's high holy day. Fox News Digital investigation identifying a sprawling, quote, red-blue network with combined annual revenue of about $2 billion, that's with a B, organizing some 3,000 protests and events, advancing what critics describe today as an anti-American agenda. They have called for Americans to skip work, to skip school, and to skip shopping. In other words, my fellow Americans, you should just stop being America. You should stop doing the things that make America great, that keep America going, that keep putting food on your table and taking care of your kids and your grandkids and one another and our neighbors and our friends. You should stop the American way of life. That's what some 600 groups of Americans are saying today, according to this. At the center of the MayDay mobilization, this is happening as we speak today. At the center of this mobilization is a network of communist, socialist, Marxist, and other far-left organizations led by the chapters of the Democratic Socialists of America and a network of groups, including the People's Forum, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, Answer Coalition, and Code Pink. Funded, got to follow the money, folks, funded by an American-born tycoon, Neville Roy Singham, based in Shanghai, promoting the propaganda of the Chinese Communist Party. The Communist Party of the USA has rallied workers to rise against MAGA on MayDay. MayDay. And we say that thinking that very thought here on May 1. This is what's going on today. Yep. Don't go to work. Don't go to school. Don't go shop. No, you should protest. In Wisconsin, the Madison Metropolitan School District. We're almost to a break. We'll see if we can get through this. This is in the capital city. Madison Metropolitan School District in Wisconsin officially canceled school today due to a large number of teachers planning to participate in anti-ICE protests. In a message sent to parents and posted on the district's website, officials announced the closure due to expected low staff turnout for the A Day Without Immigrants event, which is part of the far-left MayDay Strong National Day of Action. A whopping 70% of the district staff signed on to support canceling school for the protest today. That's just one state. We don't have time to dig them all out of all the things that are going on. Again, though, 600 groups coast to coast trying to stop the American way of life. Again, God help us. And I say that sincerely from the heart. Stay with us.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, president of the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, the pterosaurs were flying reptiles, but were they good flyers or not?
Chris, it's hard to know because we've never seen one fly. We do see their skeletal remains, and some of them were absolutely huge. How could they have flown? A scientific study of some of their skulls has given us some clues. That portion of the brain which integrates input from the different sensory organs was large in the pterosaurs, much larger than in other creatures. This gives us the impression that the creature was a good flyer. Of course, evolutionists propose that all these functions and organs came about by natural selection. What could have given some non-flying creature this ability? A much better idea is that God created these huge creatures as a monument to his creative ability and imagination. Today, we just sit back and marvel. And it's been that way ever since, back in Genesis.
This is Chris O'Brien. Thanks for going back to Genesis.
You know, and having read that story just before the break there, those 600 groups coast to coast today that are telling Americans to stay home, to skip work, to skip school, and to not go shopping or anything, I want to say thank you to my fellow Americans who did go to work today. I want to say thank you to those who are serving their neighbors. I want to thank the first responders and the police and the firemen and the doctors and the nurses and the pastors, the preachers, the evangelists, and those at the neighborhood grocery store, and those who maybe have a radio job. Whatever you're doing, but you showed up today. You love your country, you love your family, you love your community, you love your state, and we don't believe in just shutting it all down because we didn't get our way. That's my opinion. Thank you for not skipping work today. Thank you, school teachers. Thank you for those of you that didn't take the day off in protest. And thank you to the greeters at the grocery stores and those that will be bagging groceries and helping us to make the most of this day that God has given. This is the day that the Lord hath made. The Scripture says, this is the day that the Lord hath made. We shall rejoice and be glad in it. Are you grateful? I'm grateful. We need to be grateful. And if you're not grateful, are you hearing? Someone can't even hear, but you can hear. Are you breathing? Someone is taking their last. There's so much we can each one be thankful for. We need to move on. The stack is a large stack of news here. So speaking of the would-be assassin from last week, this California man charged in connection with the attempt that past weekend to assassinate President Trump. He waived his right yesterday to challenge his detention in jail while awaiting trial. The decision appearing to have changed the initial decision by the defense team for alleged shooter Cole Thomas Allen. The bond hearing took place in U.S. District Court in the District of Columbia. U.S. Attorney Janine Pirro's office requested in-court filings that Allen be held without bond on charges of trying to assassinate the president, transportation of a firearm or ammunition in interstate commerce, and discharge of a firearm during a crime of violence. Washington Examiner reporting and actually showing these new images and details about the would-be assassin on Wednesday, releasing photos, a mirror selfie that he the would-be assassin allegedly took inside his hotel room roughly 30 minutes before he charged past a final security gate there at the Correspondents Association dinner. And I actually have a picture of it here, but you can't see it, but it's printed out. This image showing Allen dressed in black slacks, black dress shirt, and a red tie that was tucked into his pants. And along with this ammunition-filled bag, a shoulder holster, a knife, and tools such as pliers and wire cutters. All of this included in the latest court filing. Prosecutors say the photo was taken approximately 8:03 p.m. on April 25. Investigators also detailed Allen's movements in the hours leading up to the incident, noting that he had accessed an online presidential schedule tracker earlier that evening. Now, again, we said the reports were, and we praise God that no one was killed. There was an injured U.S. Secret Service officer, and that officer fired 5 shots at the gunman, at the alleged assassin. You know, we always have to say that. We got to make sure, it's not been proven what he was going to do, but, to be politically correct, we always have to say, he was allegedly going to assassinate the president. That's the day we live in, but that's just the way it goes. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche said the Secret Service officer was struck by a firearm in the chest, but was protected by a ballistic vest. He did return fire 5 times before the 31-year-old suspect fell to the ground and again survived. This from WorldNet Daily. Well-known evangelical leader Franklin Graham says that he was chatting with the British ambassador's wife Saturday at the White House Correspondents' Dinner when he heard what sounded like a tray of food possibly that had dropped. However, we all know now it was gunfire. And that's when Franklin Graham says that, Franklin Graham says he witnessed FBI agents leaping over tables, running through the room. He said, I didn't sense any danger. This was all told to journalist Todd Starnes on his radio show Tuesday. Franklin Graham saying a lot of people jumped under tables, and I just thought he says, I'm going to watch and see what happens. I am thankful to God that the president wasn't hurt. Addressing the criticism that there was lax security, Graham pointed out, this guy did not make it into the room. Franklin Graham, again talking to Starnes about the claim that President Trump is, quote, lucky, and Franklin said, luck has nothing to do with it. I believe it's the hand of God. I believe God protected the president and that he's an incredible individual, our president. So you may have also heard that the shooter had released a manifesto. So the New York Post obtained that, published it, what they believed the full thing, 1,052-word manifesto in which he refers to himself as Cold Force, Friendly Federal Assassin Allen. He named himself that. Among the many chilling details laid out in the manifesto, Allen maintained he was no longer willing to permit, now this is what he wrote, the would-be assassin, he wrote, he was no longer willing to permit a pedophile, rapist, and traitor to commit crimes. All of that referencing left-wing conspiracies related to President Trump. He planned to target numerous Trump administration officials, prioritized from highest ranking to lowest. Would-be assassin Allen was willing to, quote, go through most everyone in attendance at the event if it were absolutely necessary. There were various talking points and accusations that were levied against the president in this manifesto, all of this appearing to come directly from various misleading left-wing conspiracies and talking points. From Just the News, White House Correspondents Association President Weijia Zhang shared that the Hilton Hotel in Washington, D.C. Has donated unused food to 2 local shelters. Is this where that was held? I must have missed this one in getting prepared here, but Zhang said the 2,600 meals that were made for the event that night, because now that's something that we haven't talked about either, is, they have this wonderful banquet there at the White House, all of this food and all of this pageantry. Well, what happens? Well, this is good. I'm glad this is a follow-up here. 2,600 meals that were made for the event was all donated to shelters for abused women and children. They freeze-dried steak and lobster for longer shelf life before giving them to 2 shelters. So that's good. That from Just the News. And by the way, I don't have this in print, but I do recall that the president said the event will be rescheduled. I don't have a date in front of me here, but they said that they were going to reschedule that, and we certainly will let you know when that happens for what that is worth. Now, on the subject of President Trump and the hatred continually showed toward him, NRB, National Religious Broadcasters, NRB, has requested that the Federal Communications Commission investigate ABC television following remarks that were aired during the April 23 national broadcast of Jimmy Kimmel Live. Now, that is a show I have never sat down to watch, but strangely, and you've heard this too, there's no such thing as what? Bad publicity? No such thing as bad pub, and thus they survive on doing things that just, at whatever the cost. Well, the NRB is asserting that in a broader context of escalating violence, rhetoric that appears to trivialize or foreshadow harm against political leaders takes on heightened significance. Incitement to kill or inflict bodily harm on the President of the United States is a serious federal felony. National Religious Broadcasters emphasizing that its request for FCC review is not rooted solely in legal analysis, but in deep concern over the moral and cultural conditions that increasingly give rise to acts of political and social violence. If you don't know what went out on that date of April 23rd through the national broadcast of the program Jimmy Kimmel Live, now that isn't Disney. Doesn't Disney own that? Well, ABC's involved here. They have refused to fire the comedian, and we need to make that clear, too. I mean, give the guy a break. He's a comedian. What do we expect? Not to try to bash on a vocation of someone who is sincere and kind as a comedian. Those do exist. However, not in the context of the subject at hand here. In refusing to curb Jimmy Kimmel's dangerous rhetoric, ABC made clear not only its toxic left-wing bias, but also its disregard for public safety and national security. The brouhaha erupted when, here's what was said, when Jimmy Kimmel flippantly joked about the multiple assassination attempts on President Trump by referring to First Lady Melania Trump as a, quote, expectant widow. End of quote. And Kimmel had made these comments while performing a mock White House Correspondents' Dinner skit on his late-night talk show April the 23rd. He pretended to be speaking to the attendees, saying that, well, our First Lady Melania is here, so beautiful. Mrs. Trump, you have a glow like an expectant widow. And again, ABC not firing him, anything like that. This is one way to get your ratings up. It's one way to get talked about, huh, Jimmy? You'll get talked about this way. Hope you're happy. I guess you're getting what you wanted. Western Journal saying the new report claims that the FCC will be putting some pressure on Disney's TV stations as a result of the Jimmy Kimmel slam against Melania Trump. There's more on that story, but I think we've talked about it enough. We have to consider the source sometimes. It is what it is, but it is a shame that that some among us would find that funny. Let's take a break. Stay with us. For over 200 years, the American judicial system has upheld a standard so strong that a person's very life can be ended based on this level of confidence. A verdict supported by evidence that is beyond a reasonable doubt. Did you know there is evidence demonstrated beyond a reasonable doubt that we have a creator? Most are unaware of it because it has been censored from textbooks. Now, you can have this information at your fingertips. In the beautifully illustrated hardcover book, Have You Considered? Evidence Beyond a Reasonable Doubt, Bruce Malone and Julie Von Vett provide a series of unique devotions presenting evidence for every day of the year that points to the Creator. It's written in an easy-to-read format so that young and old can learn. Have You Considered is available for a donation of $18 or more from VCY. Call 1-800-729-9829. This is Crosstalk on the VCY America Radio Network. Friday News Roundup and Comment in for Jim Schneider. I am Dalton Windsor. And, President Trump, of course, we've talked much about the assassination attempt throughout this first segment here, first half of the program, and there are several more stories here, a couple more, and then we'll kind of shift gears because there is still so much other things, really the country's business that we need to talk about. And that really is what we see happening, is anything to stop America from moving forward and being that shining city on a hill that we certainly have been, can be, want to be. Earlier this week, conservatives on Twitter, X, formerly known as Twitter, uncovered a video of Representative Ted, this is spelled Lieu, of California. And this representative on video is accusing President Trump of being a child rapist during a press conference back in February of this year. Here's the quote. Is his name Lieu? Lieu. He's a representative, Democrat in California. Donald Trump, this is the quote, Donald Trump is in the Epstein files thousands of times. He said Lieu says this in a resurfaced video. In those files, there's highly disturbing allegations about Donald Trump doing what he accuses him of and threatening to kill children. Well, those words have now come back to bite Mr. Lieu of California. Americans, including a former U.S. Senate candidate, quickly took to X to call for him to be expelled from Congress, even arrested. These words also came back to haunt him in another way, as reportedly there is a photo of him posing with an actual rapist, former Democrat donor Ed Buck. That from the Gateway Pundit. Also from the Gateway, an arrest warrant was issued for former FBI Director James Comey after he was indicted by a grand jury in the Eastern District of North Carolina related to his Trump assassination post on Instagram. Remember that? Remember back in, it was a year ago this month, May of 2025, while out on his enjoyable, beautiful beach walk, James Comey said with a caption, "Here's a cool shell formation on my beach walk." Well, what it was, if you don't know, someone, we don't know who, someone had put some shells together, making the numbers 8647. Now, what's the big deal about 8647? Well, it is a political phrase interpreted as a call to remove or 86 the United States' 47th president. Don't you get sick of this stuff? I mean, grow up. These are the people that have been in our nation's highest positions. So, how many counts here? 2 felony counts. There was a presser. We have the audio.
Today, a grand jury in the Eastern District of North Carolina returned a true bill indicting Mr. James Comey with committing 2 felonies. Count 1, he knowingly and willfully made a threat to kill and to inflict bodily harm upon the President of the United States in violation of 18 U.S.C. 871A. Count 2, he knowingly and willfully transmitted in interstate and foreign commerce a communication that contained a threat to kill President Trump in violation of 18 USC 875C. Mr. Comey will be given every form of due process all citizens are entitled to receive, to include a trial by a jury of his peers. In the Eastern District of North Carolina, it doesn't matter who you are. We take all threat cases seriously and prosecute anyone who violates federal law, regardless of title or status.
That is the voice of Ellis Boyle, the acting U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of North Carolina, describing the two felonies for which James Comey is being charged. And we understand Comey did surrender Wednesday to law enforcement before making his first appearance in federal court. And he was also allowed to leave court with no conditions of release after a brief hearing that lasted less than 10 minutes. Just think of all the things our country could accomplish if we would just grow up. Just think of all the things that we could get done and the real problems that we could solve if we would. It's an agenda. That's my opinion, and rightfully. All right, the Epoch Times here. We have not covered much on Iran, nothing of Iran today, and what is the latest there? And the Epoch Times reporting just yesterday, Iran's leader releasing a statement through state-run media that Tehran will determine new rules over the disputed Strait of Hormuz as a ceasefire between the Iranian regime and the U.S. holds up. In a statement, Khamenei, who was named the country's leader in March, said that Iran will secure the Persian Gulf region and will dismantle the hostile enemy's abuses of this waterway, and that the strait will be managed by new rules. The legal rules and the exercise of the new management of the Strait of Hormuz will bring about comfort and progress to the benefit of all nations in the region, and its economic blessings will gladden the nation's heart. That was the statement. Despite Khamenei's statement, President Trump said that Iran's oil infrastructure is just days away from suffering severe problems due to crude oil being bottled up. Trump told Fox News, "Something happens where it just explodes. They say they have only 3 days left before that happens. When it explodes, or when it does explode, you can never rebuild it the way it was." SRN News reporting Donald Trump's administration is arguing that the war in Iran is already ended. It has already ended because of the ceasefire from early April. That's an interpretation that would allow the White House to avoid the need to seek congressional approval. The statement furthers an argument laid out by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth during testimony in the Senate yesterday, Thursday, when he said the ceasefire effectively paused the war. And while the ceasefire has since been extended, Iran maintains its chokehold on that Strait of Hormuz, and the U.S. Navy is maintaining a blockade to prevent Iran's oil tankers from getting out to sea. Now, the U.S. is asking allies to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The strait, which is that narrow passage between Iran and Oman, carries about 20% of the world's oil and gas, the supplies we need. Its continued closure has pushed Brent crude above $126 a barrel. According to a State Department cable seen by Reuters, Washington is seeking support for a new maritime freedom construct described in the cable as a critical first step in the establishment of a post-conflict maritime security architecture for the Middle East. France, Britain, and other countries have discussed possible roles, though some have signaled that they would join only after the fighting officially ends. Also, the town hall saying the Trump administration has announced that they would begin implementing a new strategy to tackle Iran that focuses on dismantling their shadow banking operations. The new round of sanctions will target 35 banks and individuals who are working with Chinese teapot refineries, which have paid tolls in exchange for freedom of navigation across the Strait of Hormuz. That according to Reuters. Worthy news saying that Iran's economy is rapidly deteriorating under the strain of war, with more than 1 million people out of work, inflation soaring to crippling levels. The Wall Street Journal saying another 1 million jobs have been indirectly affected as businesses shut down and supply chains collapse across the country of Iran. In response, the Iranian government is raising wages, issuing subsidies, and distributed cash assistance to the poor. Officials are also seeking alternative trade routes through neighboring countries and the Caspian Sea to bypass the blockade and maintain limited imports. Breitbart saying maritime logistics and intelligence company Windward AI published a report Wednesday that claims that Iran has slipped up to $800 million worth of crude oil past the U.S. Navy blockade by electronically disguising its tankers and Iraqi ships. Windward AI reporting deceptive shipping practices are escalating, with 10 Iran-trading U.S.-sanctioned tankers actively spoofing their locations to appear anchored off of Basra, Iraq. This reflects a long-established evasion tactic. Tankers manipulate the automated identification system signals, and they transmit false voyage data indicating Iraqi destinations, often supported by fake ownership messages. AIS, or Automated Identification System, a shipboard broadcasting system that transmits location and identification data to other ships at sea. So AIS is spoofing a key tactic of the Shadow Fleet, the network of cargo ships and tankers that carry illegal cargo in defiance of sanctions. The technique is also used by smuggling gangs and ships operating on the fringes of legal commerce. It was not clear from Windward, from their report, how successful these electronic deceptions have been. The briefing implies that at least some of the Iranian Shadow Fleet ships have been able to slip past the blockade. Quickly, but just before the break here, from AP, the world's largest aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald Ford, will be heading home following a record-setting deployment of more than 300 days that included participating in the war against Iran and capture Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro. The Ford will be leaving the Middle East in the coming days, returning to its home port in Virginia, middle of this month. The arrival of the USS George H.W. Bush to the region last week meant 3 American aircraft carriers were deployed to the Middle East, which is a number not seen since back to 2003. You think about all the planning and all the purpose and all that's going on in our country with all of our, and these are our boys, our men and our women too, our girls. I say our boys and our girls, our kids who are now serving our nation. And a reminder to me, a reminder to myself, and let us all be reminded to always remember to pray for our troops. Pray for this country. If you've been listening for any length of time, just this half hour, you know how badly we need the Lord. We'll come back for our final segment here. A few more things we certainly want to cover on this Friday News Roundup and Comment. Stay with us on the VCY America Radio Network.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brennan House. Our website's worldviewtube.com. We need to get back to the Bible, particularly when it comes to the issue of evangelism and what it means to preach the gospel. Sadly, many people are being told today, well, you don't know if the person you're talking to is even ready to hear the gospel yet. How do you know they have been regenerated? They have to be regenerated before they can be saved. They have to be born again before they can be born again. You never see that taught in the Bible. Over and over the passages. Believe on the name of the Lord Jesus Christ and thou shalt be saved. It's over and over. Charles Spurgeon addressed this in 1863. Quote, if I am to preach faith in Christ to a man who is regenerated, then the man being regenerated is saved already. And it is unnecessary and ridiculous thing for me to preach Christ to him and bid him to believe in order to be saved when he is saved already, being regenerate. End quote. Folks, don't be hindered. Preach the gospel. I'm Brennan House.
So many more things to mention. We'll really just kind of grace the headlines here. Pentagon officials confirming the release of $400 million for Ukraine. That is money that has actually already been authorized by Congress. The financing was allocated for European capacity building, and as of yesterday, it was released. That from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth telling the House Armed Services Committee. Well, we did have that special guest in the White House earlier this week, King Charles, small k, and called on the U.S. Addressing Congress, talking about partnerships, with his opening remarks condemning the third assassination attempt on U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House Correspondents' Dinner last week. Charles is the second English monarch to address Congress, the first being his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, back on May the 16th of 1991. The president has continued to get some things done this week, signing a bill yesterday, Thursday, formally ending the partial government shutdown of Department of Homeland Security. The legislation funds the Coast Guard, the TSA, the Secret Service, FEMA, Cybersecurity, and Infrastructure Security Agency, and other agencies. Make note, Republicans are planning a reconciliation package to separately approve funding for ICE and Border Patrol for the remainder of Trump's term. The signing officially ends the partial government shutdown after 76 days. President Trump, this from Newsmax, demanding that Senate Republicans scrap the filibuster to advance his top legislative priority, the Save America Act. Who would thought, and I know there can be strong arguments on both sides of the aisle on this, but who would think that, something with the name Save America would be so hard to see passed? But the president is saying we've got to end the filibuster. You got to scrap it.
Well, I think it's time for them to end the filibuster and just put everybody back to work. Vote in voter ID, vote in no mail-in voting except for military, faraway military, and people that are very sick. I'd like to see one-day voting. I'd like to see not 65 days of voting from all over the place. No, I'd like to clean up the elections. The border, we've done a great job. We have a great, strong border now, but I'd like to see new rules on immigration that can be fair and good, but rules that you'll never get, rules that they're never going to get. There's so many things we could put in, including tax cuts that we could get, and we could do it all ourselves. But to do that, you have to end the filibuster. And they'll do it, too. They'll immediately do it. What the Democrats will do is they're going to make Puerto Rico a state. They're going to make D.C. a state. They're going to pack the court. They're going to end up with more electoral votes. They're going to end up with 4 senators because of the 2 states. And they're going to do this 100%. They would have done it except Manchin and Sinema got in their way. They would have done it. So if they're going to do it, I would do it. I would do it before them.
The Save America Act would require all voters to show photo ID, require proof of citizenship for voter registration, and mandates that all ballots be counted within 36 hours of Election Day. So, they'll continue to debate on the filibuster, see what happens there. This from the Daily Signal. Senior Democrat senators telling the Daily Signal that voter citizenship and identification legislation backed by Trump continues. It's being stalled amid unified Democrat opposition. And Senator Richard Blumenthal, Connecticut, telling the Daily Signal that he hasn't heard officially that it is dead, but it shows no signs of life, asking whether Trump and hardline conservatives could revive the bill ahead of the midterms. Blumenthal predicted it would remain dormant. It seems to be lacking any kind of momentum. Republican House lawmakers have, speaking of John Thune, has urged colleagues to avoid publicly discussing abolishing the filibuster, also writing on social media that Thune has told lawmakers there would be no Save America Act. So you have things on both sides of the aisle. Here was something seismic this week. The Supreme Court issuing a ruling Wednesday preserving but tightening the use of Voting Rights Act. Justice Samuel Alito Jr., writing for the 6-3 majority, warned that the iconic 1965 law had come to be used cynically to force states to add more Democrat-friendly minority seats under the guise of protecting minority voters. That, he said, can no longer stand. The ruling strikes down Louisiana's current congressional map, which includes 2 majority black districts. Also, several headlines here regarding gerrymandering. United States Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights Harmeet Dillon saying Thursday that the Justice Department will enforce the Supreme Court's decision on gerrymandering districts in every state that has such a district. The Supreme Court striking down the 2 congressional maps in Louisiana that we just mentioned, ruling the state was unconstitutionally racially gerrymandering when it added a second majority black district. Missouri GOP Senator Eric Schmidt asked the Justice Department earlier Thursday to enforce the Supreme Court ruling nationwide. Nothing it had the power to do so. Dillon replied on X, "Senator, we are on it." The commitment comes as 45 redistricting disputes remain unresolved in federal and state courts. I see stories here on congressional mapping in Texas, Tennessee, a story from Senator Marsha Blackburn, the state of Georgia, and Governor Brian Kemp, all dealing or refusing to deal with the congressional redrawing of the maps this election cycle. Louisiana, of course, getting most of the ink this week. Even our home state of Wisconsin, as no one knows what is going to happen with Wisconsin's congressional map, but experts say the state's local political maps are almost certainly going to change after this ruling from the Supreme Court this week on racial gerrymandering. This one's one that we all certainly should learn more about and stay tuned for as things roll on. You love your country. I know you do. We love our country. We're thankful for it. And we certainly want to see God's will be done. We could continue, but the clock on the wall says we can't because we are out of time. But we would like to thank you for yours. And again, just encourage each and every one of us to pray for our country, pray for those in it's biblical for us to pray for our leaders, pray for our boys and girls, our men and women that are serving this great country, and pray that we would seek the heart of God for our lives.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Take Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.